So, hello everyone and good evening. I would like to welcome you to our conference tonight, and the title is Pandemic Politics: Fear as a Blueprint for Global Control. What we've seen during the COVID years has been unheard of in Western democracies, but nevertheless they were able to pull through with that. And we're going to be speaking about that shift of paradigm that took place. And with that, it is a great pleasure to have very interesting speakers tonight. So first of all, I would like you to welcome Mrs. Freija van den Driessche. She is a member of the Flemish Parliament, and her professional career is she is a pharmacist, has a Ph.D. in microbiology, and she used to work for Pfizer. So she can speak a little bit about what is going on behind the scenes, Pfizer, but she will predominantly speak about her experience during this whole COVID madness. And she will be able to contribute to that from a perspective of a pharmacist and a PhD in microbiology. And then, of course, I would like to welcome Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg. And it is really a pleasure to have you here. I'm really excited that you followed our invitation. Dr. Wodarg is a medical doctor, but he is more, or most notably known, I should say, when he was a member of the German Parliament, the German Bundestag. And he got on my radar in 2009. And we all remember what happened in 2009. There was this pandemic, the swine flu. And what happened back then, they were trying to, pretty much erect a totally controlled state system governing public health. Back then, they failed because of people like Wolfgang Wodarg, who spoke out against that and questioned from the very beginning the whole narrative. And, you know, back then they rushed through the process of manufacturing a vaccine against the swine flu, which at least in Germany, the government, they ordered like 50 million doses, ended up destroying over half of it because the people weren't taking them. Because, like I said, the difference back then, the media, they actually did their job back then, and they reported balanced. So for every voice they had pro all of these measures, they also had voices against all of these measures. And the people said, nah, we really don't need that. The swine flu, it's respiratory virus. We get sick, but that's it. We will heal from it. So Dr. Wodarg, he spoke out against that. And like I said, that's how he got on my radar. And when this whole COVID madness started, I remembered, because in the very beginning, it was like measures that would have made sense we were not allowed to take, like possibly restricting immigration, especially from China. That would have made sense. It would have made sense to educate people on strengthening their own immunity by taking walks on the fresh air. And, you know, none of that happened. It was fear-mongering. They literally wanted people in a panic, and that's what they were doing. So, for example, in Germany, they came out with a booklet in early 2020, and it was basically a blueprint on how to instill fear in the public, because they realized from the very first start of this whole so-called pandemic that people might not go along and follow the instructions given by the government. So they instilled fear, for instance, acknowledging that while COVID may not pose a threat to little children, but we need to we need to tell children, how would you feel if you killed your granny? So, I mean, they wrote it there. It was the German government. So, like I said, I immediately remembered how it all went down in 2009 during the swine flu. And yeah, I'm grateful ever since then that we had someone like Dr. Wodarg to really educate people on what was really going on. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And I'm really excited about our two speakers, like I said. And yeah, we're trying to prevent them from using public health as a pretext to erect a totalitarian regime. And let's dig into that. And I would like to give the floor to Freija. Please.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Tonight we will start speaking on how fear has been used to implement these restrictions we all know and how it shifted power. And I will discuss those three dimensions that are important for me. So this is freedom, this is the science, and this is the politics. And I chose those three dimensions because, of course, first of all, I am a human being. I was a young mother during COVID. And of course, in the beginning, I felt fear. I was afraid. And I think that is normal. It's in our nature. But I'm also a scientist, like Mrs. Anderson said. I am a pharmacist. I studied pharmacy and I have a PhD in microbiology. And I worked for 3 years in Pfizer in Puurs. That's at the production site where the COVID vaccines were made. I left the company in January 2020, so I wasn't there during COVID. But as a scientist, I know that it's so important to question everything and that nothing is for sure. And during COVID, that was not possible because we couldn't pose questions. And I'll end with the third dimension of my presentation, which is my view or my experiences as a politician. During COVID, so when I left Pfizer, I became a parliamentary assistant. I was working for the Vlaams Belang party in the Belgian Federal Parliament. And since last year, I was elected in the Flemish Parliament. So we all remember those images, the first days of the COVID pandemic. It's on the intensive care units. Every day in the newspapers that people were dying on the streets in Wuhan. The different phases of alarm, making people fear that we reach the next level of alarm. And the images of the Italian city, Bergamo, where the papers told us that there was no space left for the corpses. And why did media try to make us so afraid? Well, I think, first of all, fear sells, but they were also misled. I think that they were misled by the authorities, and in this case, the authorities were the virologists. And many of you maybe know this YouTube movie. It's a movie from Mark van Rans. You can find it on YouTube. It's only 23 minutes, and my neighbor is even mentioned in this YouTube movie. And Mark van Rans, he was our national flu commissionary, and he tells there at the Chatham House how to sell a pandemic, how to sell vaccines. It was in tempore non suspecto. It was before we ever heard of SARS-CoV-2, but he explains how you need to sell a pandemic. So he tells there that day one is very important to start to set your story. You have to speak with one voice and one message. And he tells that you need to be an expert to do so, not a politician. Because if you are an expert, they won't oppose you. And as a politician, you have the opposition. And he says, as an expert, it's important that you can play the naive guy, because he says so, then you get more things done in Brussels. So he says that as an expert, you have more power than as a politician. And you need to be omnipresent. And believe me, he was omnipresent the first days, and till today, he was omnipresent, because if you are omnipresent, if you take up every phone call, if you go to the TV studio every day, they won't ask anyone else. So they won't hear alternative voices. And in April, I was on a lecture in Ghent on disinformation, and it's a picture that I took there, and we see Luc Pauwels. He's a journalist of the VRT. So the VRT is our Flemish broadcaster, public broadcaster, and he showed that video there, and he told at the VRT they weren't aware of the existence of this video, and when they saw it, of course, when harm was done after the pandemic, they realized that they had been used by Mark van Ranst and that he had been able to implement his strategy entirely. So these omnipresent virologists, why did I use fear? Because, of course, fear makes people to act instinctively. And we as a herd, we have that flight reaction, and we are looking for leaders. And in this case, the leaders that were the virologists. Also, we had the loss of connection. We lost connection with our family, with our network, with our job, with our friends. And people were shown as being a source of infection, which also caused further alienation from each other. There was no empathy with other victims, young people, people that lost their jobs, and we only saw numbers of the coronavirus victims. We also know it was very traumatic for families. People had to die alone. So even in that, there was a dehumanization. And that loss of connection makes people susceptible for mass formation. They find a new but a false connection. And we saw that in those slogans like "Together against COVID" and "Together we can beat it if we do this or that." And so they implemented those visual handlings. We remember the masks, the hygiene, absurd rules, and those things that addresses fear and that supports the psychology and the crowd formation, because these things that were signs of that new connection. And that causes a lot of harm in society, the focus on the coronavirus death, and it's shown very nicely in this picture that beneath the surface, the problems were huge, but we didn't see them. And when an expert wanted to point these other problems out, they were silenced. And this is a picture I want to show. It's me in the hospital, not because of a COVID infection, but I just gave birth to my baby girl, and it was the 21st June 2020. And the reason I want to show this is because I had to wear a mouth mask. And many of you know, giving birth to a baby, of course, and breathing is very important. So I didn't want to wear that, and the nurses, they didn't say anything when I took it off, but the doctors insisted me to wear it. So again, the doctors, they are the authority, and they just follow the rules, while the nurses, they had more common sense. But I had to wear that mask, and I had no symptoms. I was healthy, and I had a negative PCR test. So at that moment, I realized this is not about healthcare, this is not about science, this is just crazy, this is just control. And for me, that was a turning point from being afraid in the beginning to become very angry and to oppose to the rules. So I think many of you might have a turning point as well, the moment that you realized this is not okay. So now I'll focus a little bit more on the scientific part. So as I said before, I studied at Ghent University. And the reason I want to tell this is because since 2 weeks we have at that university a new rector. It's Petra de Sutter. So she became the new boss of the university, and she is a former Green politician, so for the Green Party. She's a transgender, and she was asked on her opinion on anti-vaxxers. And this is what she says about it. She says the real anti-vaxxers who would want to conduct research here at this university to prove that the vaccines are dangerous or have disadvantages, they have a harmful effect on public health. I think that's where we need to draw the line. So in the same interview, she says that if you want to investigate whether the Earth is flat, that's no problem. But because you don't harm anyone, but investigate the disadvantages of vaccines, you cannot do that. Well, that's very dangerous to say, because of course we need to know if there are disadvantages, because we give these vaccines to healthy people, and it's dangerous that she says so. And I hope for this university that the scientists who are brave to speak up, that they will be able to continue to do so. But for my alma mater, I think that the future is not very bright with a rector like this. And the slogan of this university is "Dare to Think." And it's all I think 3 years ago she blocked me on Twitter. So I don't think she dares to think very much. And while this rector says that we don't have to examine the adverse or possible adverse effects of vaccines. We know that there are a lot of questions, that there remain a lot of questions, and the questions that are left unanswered are, of course, questions that are worth asking. For instance, on the quality control, I show you here a recent publication from the 6th of September in which they quantified DNA both in the vaccines of Pfizer and Moderna. And we know that the DNA found is above the accepted thresholds. And we need to investigate this, and we need to know what are the possible consequences of these facts. Also, there have been shortcuts in toxicology testing during the preclinical safety test. We need to know what are the consequences of that. Also, the existence of frameshift proteins, we know that that can occur, so we need to investigate what might be the clinical impact of that. And government said, don't worry, just take the vaccines because they are effective. And we remember from the beginning these effects from the trials, that there was a 95% of effectivity. There were huge numbers. But we have to question effective on what? Because for a vaccine, we want two things. We want that it reduces the likelihood that we get severely ill, that we need to go to the hospital, or that we die. And we also wanted to prevent infection and interrupt the transmission. But the clinical trials for Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, they were not designed to test either. They just focused on positive PCR tests and on one symptom. So these trials were not able to look at hard endpoints like hospitalization and mortality. Another issue is the difference between the population in the trials and the target population. So the population in the trials, it were healthy young individuals, while now the vaccine is given to people that are immune compromised, but they were excluded in the trials. There was only 5% of elderly people included in the trials, while this is now our target population. Another thing I would like to stress is the lack of informed consent. And I'll want to show it just by one example here. I wonder how many people know this, because in the formulation of the vaccines, we have the PEG lipid. And when you introduce the PEG lipid, it's possible that antibodies are induced. And the PEG itself, the chains are not very immunogenic. But if you combine these PEG lipids with the mRNA vaccine, the possibility that antibodies are formed increases. And repeated boostering increases this even more. And we have other drugs that are important in treating cancer that are formulated with the PEG lipids also. So it's possible that people start reacting differently, or that the effectivity of other drugs is just changing because of the repeated boostering with these COVID vaccines. But a lot of people, they are not aware of this, and that's a problem because we need to inform them on what they are taking. So the vaccines were not the only tool that they used to take us out of this crisis. They had also other measures taken, and one of these measures that made me very angry too were the masks, and masks for kids from 6 years on. And I want to show you this picture because it shows how the government used their state-funded institutions to tell the same narrative. Because here at the right, you can see a slide from the fact-checkers from the government in which they investigated and in which they say that masks do not hinder breathing of kids. So I think sometimes it's better just to use our common sense over science because, of course, mouth masks hinder breathing of kids. And I asked our minister, for instance, on this mask, what is the utility? What has been the utility of these masks? And I linked that to a paper in which they investigated the correlation between using masks and excess mortality. And the answer of our minister was that, in general, there is a consensus that wearing masks reduces the transmission of pathogens. So she says there is a consensus, while okay, there is a consensus, but it's the opposite. We have a great Cochrane study in which they investigated several physical interventions, and one of them was the mask. And the conclusion of this Cochrane study is that wearing masks in the community makes little or no difference on the outcome of corona-like illness compared to not wearing masks. And these Cochrane studies, they are state-of-the-art. They are great meta-analysis. And I have been told that the team of the Cochrane had experienced a lot of political pressure to withdraw this paper, and that they had to go in against the will of their boss. So luckily they were able to keep this study published. Another thing that made me very angry were the COVID safety kits. I was not vaccinated, and for me at that time that was difficult because in the beginning the COVID safety kit, it was sold to give us back our freedom, because with the COVID safety kit we were able to travel abroad. So it was sold as giving back your freedom, but some months later we needed a COVID safety kit for anything, for everything, for going to drink something, we needed it. So if you didn't get a vaccine, it was you had to organize your life differently. And for me as an adult, I took that decision not to be vaccinated, and I took the consequences. But as a parent, can you explain to your 12-year-old daughter or son that they couldn't go ice skating? That's impossible. They don't understand that. But that was the case. It's a picture for ice skating, and you needed to disinfect your hands. You needed to show a COVID safety kit from 12 years on, and you needed to wear the masks from 6 years on. Again, that's not healthcare, that's not science, that's just crazy, that's just control. And I was, of course, not the only one who was angry for this. There was a citizen that made a petition. You can do that in the Flemish Parliament. And he asked for the scientific evaluation on which the politicians chose the cutoff for 12 years. And the answer was, well, we have no scientific base for that. It's a political decision. Again, there is a scientific base, but again, it's the opposite. We have an advice of the Superior Health Council, it's the Belgian institution, that they say that under no circumstances you can limit the rights and the freedom of the kids regarding to the COVID vaccines. So again, the civilian asked, okay, there is no scientific base, let's do an evaluation. And our Minister of Healthcare, she said, I do not see the necessity for an evaluation. Then the Parliament had to vote on this answer, and you can guess, Parliament, majority, they said, we do not need an evaluation. That was 2 months ago. So even in 2025, Flemish Parliament is not ready to make an evaluation. And let me tell you, it's very clear that kids, we do not need to vaccinate kids against COVID. There are several studies that say that they have good natural immunity or robust immunity, and we knew that before the COVID safety kit was introduced for these kids. Another thing I want to show you was an experience I had during the time that I was working as a parliamentary assistant in the Belgian Federal Parliament. We had hearings on the mandatory vaccination, and as a political party, we were able to invite some scientists, some experts related to that topic, and we are free to ask whoever we want to. So we as Vlaams Belang, we chose to invite scientists that had been silenced. But the other political parties, they were furious, and they tried to avoid us to invite these two men. We chose Sam Brokken and Geert van den Bosse, and we succeeded to ask them. So the next step that they did and that the media did was trying to frame them. And I show here two print screens from the newspapers from these days, and they call them Corona expert between quotation mark. They say that it was under the pressure of the Vlaams Belang, but it's all right to ask them. It's framing that we need to put their pressure on it. They say it's were Corona skeptici, but we organize hearings, and in hearings you want to hear different voices. So you need people that are skeptic. If you only invite people that are in favor of it, that we hear every day in the news, why would we have to organize a hearing? That's maybe possible in communist China, but also here it seems to be possible. And it's an example of how experts were silenced, experts with a different opinion. And I remember the words of Mark van Ranse, one voice, one message. And if you are not succeeding them in silencing them, try to frame them. And it's the media, it's the other experts that choose who is right and who is a wrong expert. And the authorities, the right experts, we cannot doubt on what they say because they needed a scientific consensus. But of course, the scientific consensus, there was no consensus. And this is Professor Pierre van Damme. He is one of the experts who's always right. And I have two examples of what he said. So, for instance, he said that the third vaccine dose might give you immunity for many years. Well, till today, he is every year making campaign and trying to tell to people to take the new booster. So, of course, what he said was not true. Another thing that he said is that when you take the vaccine, there won't be a transmission anymore. Of course, that was a lie because at the time that he said that, we know. From the trials, it was not shown in the trials. It was not in line with the observations. And we know that when we give a vaccine in the muscles, it doesn't stop the transmission of mucosal infections. So we knew that he was lying. And Sam Brokken, the one that we wanted to invite in the parliament, Sam Brokken was in national TV opposing to what Professor Van Damme said. And, well, we know the consequences. The man who opposed Sam Brokken, he lost his job. And Pierre van Damme, recently, he was awarded with the title of Baron. And his institution in the University of Antwerp, it's Vaccinopolis, every year it's funded with millions of money from us as a taxpayer. So that's how it goes. Something else I want to show you is the following, and it was also 2 months ago. The Flemish government, they had a new prevention decree. They wanted to change many, many things, but one of the things that they wanted to change was in the contact tracing, and it had a huge impact on our privacy. And I show you a slide from the remarks of our Flemish Data Protection Authority. And what they say is the following, that measures that may have been considered necessary during COVID, although they were already contested by some group at the time, are now being turned into the norm. So things that were impossible before COVID became possible during COVID because, of course, it was a crisis. But now, after COVID, they just make it law. They make it legislation. And for me, that's a perfect example of this quote, emergencies have always been the pretext on which the safeguards of individual liberty have been eroded. And that's happening every month. Another thing is that I want to stress is the current situation in Flanders. So we have this yearly booster campaigns. And if you just still today mention COVID, we have plenty of money. The organization of the campaign, just the campaign, so not the costs for the vaccines, for the doctors, the pharmacists, the transport. Only the cost for the organization of the campaign in Flanders cost 2.5 million euros. And then the price of the vaccines, of course, we still don't know. We have the tender at least till next year. So there is no free market. We have the multi-dose vials, which also causes a lot of waste. While in the United States, they have the single-use syringes and single-dose vials. We still work with those multi-dose vials. And we have every year new vaccines because of the changing variants. Also, that is an interesting business model for big pharma. So that causes a waste of vaccines and, of course, a waste of money. And I constantly ask our minister on data, and here are some print screens from answers I got from the minister. So for the XBB vaccine, that was a vaccine used in 2023 during that vaccine campaign. We have 174,000 vaccines left over. That's a huge amount, and they are still kept at minus 80 degrees. It costs a lot of money. They have been expired in January, and our government hasn't yet decided what to do with these vaccines. Also, for the campaign from last year, these are the GN1 vaccines. We have 350,000 vaccines left over. And for this campaign, we ordered again new vaccines. So all these 350,000 vaccines, they are expiring the next month. We will have to, I don't know what they want to do with it. I think that they will just throw it away. And I wrote a lot of newspapers to publish this data, but they are not interested in it. And so the vaccines during our Flemish campaigns, they are available for free. Everyone who wants can get them without control of a GP. So also this is against the advice of our health council. And something that was striking is that in this year, the FDA granted a different approval for the COVID-19 vaccines compared to the European Medicine Agency, which reflects a diverging regulatory stances and requirements. So in the United States, they have it approved for 65 and older and people with underlying conditions, whereas in Europe, there are no limitations. So to conclude, I think that for many people, the period of COVID, they don't want to think of it anymore. For them, it's case closed, and the only moment when they think of it is when they take an old handbag out of their closet and they find a mask, then they remember for 5 minutes. But for many other people, it's not a case closed because they recognize the elements of totalitarianism, of control, of silencing alternative voices, and for these people, they see it as a bigger story, as a start of the totalitarian control, and the colleagues will go on that further. And I think to conclude that the expertise without a contradiction has been very dangerous because the experts, they only saw one part of the whole, that there is need of a debate and of course the political co-responsibility. That it's so important for us that we look for our civil liberties and our bodily integrity, that politics must be in the cockpit to safeguard these rights. And during COVID, they weren't brave enough to go in to the will of these virologists. And we need an informed consent without a societal pressure. And we saw the mass formation and the manipulation. We had bad science and expert statements that did not match with the observations. There was the abuse of the crisis to push measures and power, and fear was used as a tool, and the vaccines were used as a salvation. But so, if you want to contact me, these are my email and X addresses, and this was my presentation, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Freija. And I do have to apologize. I once again screwed up the introduction and the opening remarks. I was so starstruck with our esteemed speakers here that I completely forgot that there's someone else sitting next to me. Which we're actually, Gerolf Annemans from the Patriots, we're actually co-chairing this conference tonight, which you would have never guessed from my opening remarks. So please forgive me. Please forgive me. It will never happen again, I swear. So Gerolf will sum it up at the end and have some closing remarks, but I'm really honored that you would co-chair this presentation with me, this conference with me. And yeah, now with no further ado, I would give the floor to, once they have arranged they need to switch places.
Just we have to change.
Yes, okay. See, the technology in this parliament is not state-of-the-art, as you can see. The speakers need to switch places so they can operate their laptops. So maybe we shouldn't just collect money for Ursula von der Leyen's new phone. Maybe for some high-tech equipment here, possibly. But without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a long time that I've been here in this house. And as a parliamentarian, I was I was rapporteur for health and for social affairs in the German Bundestag. Everything that came from Brussels, I had to, and it were piles of paper. I had to employ 2 people to have a glimpse of what happens here. So it was never transparent for me what really happens here. But this is why I was always on the alert when something new came. So I wrote a book which is called False Pandemics. The most important thing, it's plural. And this says something about my experiences with such events. I was, since 2002, I experienced the first SARS event in Guangdong. And I was speaking in Parliament there. But I was not so much mistrusting what was happening in that time. But I told the Chinese they should be more open and let the WHO come into the country to find out what happened. But now I know this was already the first fake pandemic. And this was the test for the PCR test to identify some virus which might be not even the reason for all those cases they found there. You know how you find a high mortality of a disease? It's a very easy trick. You just try to find cases in intensive care station. And if you make the test there and you find cases in the intensive care station, 10 to 30% in the intensive care station normally die. So you always have a high mortality if you look for cases there. So it's just a very simple trick they used to tell us that SARS was very, very dangerous with a mortality of 10%. And this went on. It was easy because I learned something about those topics. I was a public health specialist and I was the director of a public health institute in northern Germany. I'm a specialist for internal medicine. I was trained in hygiene. I was even in Johns Hopkins University trying to learn some epidemiology. I got a grant there, but in that time, Johns Hopkins was a good university. It's changed. Somebody bought it. So, okay. But so I just want to say that public health and finding out risks of infections always was my job. And then there was BSE, there was the birds flu, the first birds flu in 2005, and then there was swine flu. And when this came now I was always very engaged in politics, and before as a director of this public health institute, always critical. And when this came in Wuhan, this story there, in January in 2020, I thought, no, not again, please. Don't do this game again. I am fed up with all this stories and storytelling. So I was not very interested to deal with it. But then it became worse and worse, and they insisted, and I started making some research, and I made a report in the middle of February where I was already seeing, and I was taking all the data from the CDC. In China, they have the CDC too. And they are collecting data about infections, and I collected all that. And it's easy. On the internet, you can find all that. And I found out there was nothing. There was something in Wuhan, there was something in Guangdong, and some 3 or 4 towns along the coast. But the rest of China was free. There was nothing. And so I was very suspicious then. And I wrote a big article. And I was very critical in public. And I was once, by chance, I was invited to the German big television, the ZDF. They made an interview, and I was critical in ZDF. But afterwards, they were sorry that they invited me. And the poor journalist that invited me by chance, she got big problems. So this was the last time I was in the big media, and I had to care for other ways. But the article, I used to give them to newspapers whom I used to work with, big newspapers, Süddeutsche, Frankfurter, Tagesspiegel in Berlin, and I presented it. And Tagesspiegel said, oh, very good article. And next day he called me and said, oh, Dr. Wodarg, I'm sorry, but the House doesn't want to publish your article. I didn't understand why. And he didn't either. So it was a very surprising events that I experienced. And I was going on with my research. Yes. And now this is how I came into the topic, and it was more and more intensive, and I found out there was something very big behind it. It was different from what I experienced all the times before. This was small exercises, what I experienced all those years before, the other pandemics, so-called pandemics. This was something big. And it was not well prepared. It was long prepared, but there were many mistakes done. And I was looking for those mistakes. First, I want to tell you something about viruses, very shortly. You know, this is my favorite picture. Pardon? It's not there? You cannot see it? Oh, sorry. Presentation isn't showing up. I hope we will manage. I just connected and connected again.
Yeah. Okay, he's coming.
Yeah? So it shows a map of the world, and it shows all the aeroplanes going around the world. It's about 10 million passengers a day. Can you do it?
Maybe projection mode is here.
Yeah.
So as you can see, they do not only cancel interviews with Dr. Wodarg, but also the presentation.
Yeah, but there's for sure someone who is taking my cape. Yeah. Yes, but I can tell you there are about 10 million passengers flying around the world each day, and each of you has about 39 trillion microbes in his body and on his body. So it's enormous numbers of microbes each human being is carrying around, and we are exchanging continuously our microbes. Now when you sit here, you exchange them. You cannot avoid it. And maybe it's not the microbes, but it's only exosomes. It's part of them, and it depends. Yeah. Yes, it's there.
Projection mode.
No, doesn't work. So you exchange them, and it's not possible to avoid to have contact with viruses. And even the masks, they are like open windows for viruses. They don't hinder anything. So knowing this, we also have to have in mind that in winter, when we have winter, Australia has summer, and the other way around. So many passengers come when there is a flu season in Australia, and people get ill. There is this amount of illnesses in Australia in winter there. But they come also in winter, they come to us, and here is summer. Oh, we don't feel it. They don't transmit. What's that? Thousands of people come from Australia, and there is no contamination. So I think I have this picture of, and it's about nature. It's about. It's there. It's there somewhere.
Yes.
This is okay.
Yes.
It has to be on the cable. Take it out.
Yes.
Turn it like this. Let's see. Yeah, now it comes. There it is. There it is.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. You see, this is an outbreak. And this is in Greece, where I live now. But you have outbreaks similar in Belgium with the white color in spring, or the yellow color is the first, and the white color, and you see the meadows changing their colors. And on the meadows we have, in our mucosa, we have flourishing things too. And these are viruses. They need certain conditions, certain temperature, certain environmental conditions that they can be multiplied, they can flourish. And we experience this each year for thousands of years. In the last 100 years or something about that, We have contacts all over the world with all viruses existing in this whole globe, continuously. But in Africa, our flu viruses are not very successful. The same as those flowers are not very successful when you bring them to Africa. So they need certain conditions. And this is in winter, we have flu seasons, and there were many people who were examining this. This is from Glasgow, a woman who was doing a study for 13 years, and they were only looking for 11 different viruses, but they found that those viruses had a certain sequence and a certain time when they flourished most. And on the upper part of this picture, you see the black space, and this is all those cases where they didn't find any virus, but they were all ill. All those people were ill. All of them they examined. But in most of them, they didn't find any virus because they didn't have a test for those viruses. And the white ones, they found viruses, and this is those mountains on the colorful part of the picture. And you see there were coronaviruses. Coronaviruses are more often there as influenza viruses. But we never spoke about coronaviruses. We always spoke about the flu with influenza, because this has a reason, because the first vaccination was invented against influenza, and there was nobody interested in corona because they couldn't sell anything. And then it's well known that there are more than 200 viruses who make similar symptoms. And it depends which test you have. You find only those things which you're looking for, where you have the instrument to find it. You don't see all those phenomena, those biological entities you don't find when you don't have a special test. But they are there. And I made a quiz, and I will show you these pictures. I made a quiz with the monkeypox, who are also said to be a virus consequence. And there are seven pictures. I got them from the British Health Service. And they all show some pustular efflorescences, pimples and pustules. And I asked, which of these are mpox, monkeypox? There was a big discussion in Twitter and in X. And they said, oh, number 2 must be, or no, number 3. And so they were discussing all it. And the solution was, each of them are monkeypox when the PCR test is positive. Very easy. You can have different viruses which similar symptoms, and if you do only one test, the monkeypox PCR test, you find some cases where the monkeypox test is positive. You know that the PCR is not able to show a disease. It's only able to show a certain small sequence, which some scientists thought it is typical for some virus, which they choose. And like this, there was in 2022, there was this breakout, there was a pandemic. Mr. Ghebreyesus from WHO said, we have a pandemic of monkeypox. He announced it. And then I started laughing. I made this quiz, and I was joking about them, because it was ridiculous. You know, this is herpes simplex, this is herpes genitalis. There were those gay people having a party in France. And they had some pimples somewhere, I don't know where. But the tests were positive. So they found some 100 positive tests. It's easy to have some 100 positive tests with people with pimples. And then they said, this is monkeypox. And so I started laughing about that. And I was successful. WHO just silently stopped the whole action and said nothing more about the monkeypox. It was forgotten. I want to tell you, what we are speaking about is COVID-19. What is COVID-19? What is it? Who defined it? Who said what it is? It was WHO. And it was repeated by all the national health agencies. And they made it obligatory to register. The doctors had to send it to the central that they found a new case. And which cases did they have to tell those people? Melden, we say. So this is the scheme from the WHO page. I added some instructions there. I added some comments there. And there were 3 different kinds of COVID. They all were cases. One was COVID-19 virus identified. This was when somebody had a PCR test positive, and there were 2 ways, one with symptoms and one without symptoms. If the PCR test for COVID-19 was positive, you had a symptomatic or an asymptomatic cases, and they all had to be registered and were counted as COVID cases. So what was counted was the positive PCR test. Where those symptoms came from, nobody was interested anymore. And they didn't make other tests. There was no differential diagnosis anymore. They only made COVID, and we were fixed on COVID tests in hospitals, and they were paid for COVID tests. And it was rewarded if you were thinking of COVID. And if you had a COVID patient, you get extra money in the hospital. Not for influenza. So they really opened the mind of the doctors, and the doctors were searching for COVID. And it was easy if you had a positive test on your patient, it was COVID. And it was registered and counted. And this was the reason why they said, oh, we have to make some measures now. We have to keep distance, have to wear masks. And they took those results. And then there was another one where the PCR test was negative, but people had symptoms. Why that? If those people with symptoms had contact with a case, this was an epidemiological case. So if you had in your family someone who had a positive test and you had a cough, had some symptoms, the doctor had to say, oh, he had contact and he has symptoms. This is a case of COVID. It has nothing to do with any medical diagnosis. It was just such a horrible joke what they told, just a horrible nonsense what they were using to tell us what COVID is. And if we speak about COVID now, we seriously speak about COVID. Still, I had COVID. It's crazy what we do. There was someone with a positive PCR test and I had contact with them. It's so crazy. It has nothing to do with medicine. I was in the Chamber of Medicines. I was examining doctors there as a lung doctor. If they would have told me such thing, they had to go out, stop immediately, had to learn again. But it's just incredible. For me, it was incredible. And now we're speaking about post-COVID and long COVID. This is some disease which you have after the test was positive somewhere with you or with some contact you had. So the whole thing we speak about is about the results of those test pandemic we were experiencing. And there were those numbers about coronaviruses which were found. This was 2021. There were 5.5 million cases in Robert Koch Institute in Berlin. And influenza, suddenly only 1,100 cases. Nothing. Influenza had gone. They didn't look for it. You only find what you're looking for. It's so easy and so stupid what happened. So WHO has a very big power. WHO has a definition and setting norms. WHO says what is an emergency, public health emergency of international concern. It's pronounced fake. And they define what it is and how you find it. And they tell us also what is an outbreak. They tell us which is the gold standard for detecting an outbreak. And they tell us what to do. And they tell us how to prevent and which vaccinations are recommended and everything. And they make the International Code of Diseases. This is the most powerful instrument they have. If they don't give a number to some symptoms, this disease does not exist. And if they give a number to a disease that does not exist, this disease is counted, like with COVID. So this was something WHO was using, and the WHO is not only setting norms. For me, the WHO is an institution, an agency for preparing insider business. So you invest in WHO, and you have something in your pipeline against some disease you think could be important, And the WHO is the machine who frightens the people, who makes it. And then the stock exchange, the values of your enterprise, they rise. And the shares, it's good for the shareholders. So this is the main function of the WHO all those last years. It was with the swine flu. It was also with Tamiflu with Mr. Rumsfeld, who used WHO to tell us there's a bird's flu. Nobody noticed anything about a bird flu. There was no epidemiological traces of any unusual flu. But Mr. Rumsfeld made a big business. He was a big shareholder of this this company where he was a CEO before. So this is all happening in front of our eyes. We see it, and there's no big wave of protest among doctors, among politicians, governments. Why? Why are it so easy to make us, with such stupid lies, to make us follow? There are several tools how you can do this. One is the totalitarian tools, the most successful ones, to circumvent democratic decisions and to stop autonomous self-organization. One is institutional corruption. You have to buy the agencies or this institution, and the media is institution too. So you have to buy important organizations and institutions. You have to watch out that you get all of them. With the swine flu, they were not so successful. So they only sold 4 million doses of this vaccine, the Glaxo vaccine, only 4 million. They had bought 50 million. And Mr. van Ranst, who was mocking at me in his speech there, he said, "Oh, Wodarg, he came too late. I came too late for Glaxo because Glaxo had the money already." But the injections were not given. People didn't take them because the doctors were afraid to use them, and they were destroyed afterwards. So I could save the people, but I could not save the money. So institutional corruption is a very, very, it's the most dangerous pandemic we have. We are used to entrust certain tasks in our society. You to say, you do this, the finance, that the money keeps its worth for us when we give the money to the bank, and the others, they say, you make laws, and they are afterwards. The politicians make laws, and the lawyers, they are the, like in football, you say, with the one with the whistle. They say when there is a foul, and they kick you off the place, and so so we have rules, and we have job sharing in our society, and we have to rely on all this. But if there are private interests and secondary interests who are creeping into our system, then we cannot rely anymore. And our system has changed. The subsystems of our society are being abused by parasitic interests. And they just misuse what we established as a democracy, as our democratic republic, and they just misuse it for collecting money. And they have certain methods to do it. They use the professional influences from the PR industry, from the lobby industry. And there I had my students, I had made them looking in the internet what they are offering, what you can buy there, what the lobby is offering. And they found out a lot. There are embedded lobbyists everywhere in all institutions. They send them into the ministry, they send them into the agencies. They have their lobbyist contact there. And they have the embedded media. They make their own media, and they make their own publishing house for scientists to publish things they want to have published because they want to change the scientific image we have. And when you have an NGO, they come and they try to buy this NGO. They send there somebody for the administration, a nice young girl or a nice young guy, and he's doing the routine work, and you have all those people there in this NGO fighting for good rights and fighting for good things. And they sent someone in the board of this NGO from their connections, and I experienced it. Even Transparency International. I was in Transparency International 10 years in the board in Germany. I was the boss of the working group on health, fighting corruption in health. And then suddenly I experienced that there was in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, there was a meeting fighting corruption in the health system. And there was sitting some guy from pharmaceutical company, this head organization for all companies. There was sitting someone boss of Glaxo. There was sitting someone from WHO from the board, and there was sitting someone from Transparency International UK. It was in Germany, and they didn't invite me. So nevertheless, I was there. And when I had looked in the papers of Transparency, and I found out that Transparency was financed, this chapter was financed 40% by Glaxo, and another 10% by Wellcome Trust. So Transparency was just their tool. They occupied this NGO, and when you find Change.org and how they are called, and all those NGOs trying to make our system better and improving our democracy, they are very cheap to be bought. They can buy them very cheap. It's easy. It's cheaper than to buy a party. You can buy parties too. And you have those revolving doors, which is an instrument to buy politicians. You promise them. You see all those careers. And it goes like that. You have a chancellor now who was in some Black Rock also, who was a very important career there. I started with him in Parliament at the same time. We both came in German Parliament together. And we had a competition of speakers. And it was organized by the old parliamentarians, and he was speaking there, I was speaking there. He made the first prize. I only was the third. But I know him from the beginning, and yes. So you see all those, they have, even if there is no grassroots lobbying which they can buy, they make one. They make astroturfing. They roll out the grassroots, and they pay the people who are demonstrating. And you can buy anything. And you can buy monitoring of parliamentarians, of politicians. They are profiling this, and what is the interest? How can you influence this one and that one? You can buy all this. It's a very, very big industry, and it's very successful. And Mr. Schwab in 2017 was telling, what we are very proud of now is how we penetrate the cabinets around the world. This is what he said. Yes. In 17, and there are all those guys, global young leaders, and they are from all over the world, from China, from Russia, from everywhere. And it's very, very interesting. If you control those leaders and dominate the media, you needn't care what the people vote for. It's no more interesting. You may have an election campaign, forget it. And the second trick, this is all corruption, institutional corruption. And the second trick is outsourcing decisions. Taking the decisions in a democracy away from the people, put them somewhere far away where nobody can see what's going on. Externalize it. Put it to Brussels. From Kiel to Brussels. Or it's very, very easy without sourcing of setting standards and regulations. Parasitic forces are escaping democratic regulations. This is a very, very old trick. And to do this, health is a very good topic. With health, you can influence people because everyone is interested in health anyway, in some way. And the political misuse of health was started in 1880 with Bismarck. Before the pre-industrial time, health was a private matter. My health is none of your business. Why should someone be interested in my health? It's my thing, how I want to live healthy. But they started changing this way of self-esteem, of autonomy, health autonomy. They changed it. They said, oh no, it started when the workers were organizing, when the industrialization came. The workers who were from their villages, taken away, unrooted, And they had to organize where they lived now with their young families, children's working. And so there were many ill people, many children dying. So they came together and they self-organized, the workers. And they made some gardening clubs, or they made a singing club, or and they helped each other when somebody was ill. And this improved in some years, was getting better and better. And they were making something like a small health insurance among themselves. They paid into a case, into some box, and then if they could help each other. And Bismarck saw this, and the big industrial people, they saw this, and they said, oh, this may be dangerous. Perhaps they make unions now. And they go on strike. They organize. It's dangerous when the workers organize. So he said, we will regulate it, and it became regulated by the state. And the rules for self-organizing were now controlled by Bismarck, by the state. And this went on, this goes on till now. We don't self-organize. There are some people somewhere who make rules how we may organize. And so health is no more a private matter. And after World War II, it was Rockefeller who was always looking for oil and for treasures somewhere in foreign countries. And he was used to making some greenwashing of his work. He built up schools in those countries, and he was educating staff for medical staff there and such things. He did good things there to be accepted by the government, and that the government could say, look, Rockefeller is taking the oil from our country, but he's doing a lot of good things for our country. Like this, he was working from 1914 to 1945. And then he just invested a lot of money, and he chose someone from Tavistock Clinic, a psychiatric guy, and he made him the general secretary of the WHO. He founded WHO. There is a lot of science about this, founding WHO with Rockefeller. And he passed all those tasks of going into the world and doing something for health where it was needed, as he thought. He passed it over to this organization, and health became a human right. And if there was a state who did not care for the health of its people, they were interfering. So some other states came there and said, you don't watch the health of your citizens. And this then, after the Cold War, this changed a little bit, because there was only one part of the globe which was obeying Rockefeller, and the others they made something of their own, like China and Russia and the communist part of the world. They made something of their own, but then the health became a business, became a growth market. It was globalized. The market for health products was globalized suddenly, and WHO was one of the most important agencies to prepare this. And so the poor people in Africa, they have the same right as we to get the good drugs we produce, like this. And we have to pay, we have to collect money in Germany and everywhere for those poor people in Africa and somewhere else. And then Corona started, and then health became a pretext for control. They said, we have to watch you, we have to get the information, with whom you had contact, what symptoms you had, and how the tests, which results you had in your tests, and all this, and it became a pretext for control. And control system with health indicators was installed all over the world. And now after Corona, it becomes totalitarian politics. We speak about the One Health. And the European Union is investing a lot of money in this nonsense, finding out in the sewers, in the sewers in the communities, they collect the water in the sewers, and they analyze it with PCR tests. And they find many, many, many dangerous things. It's not only the shit of human beings, it's also from dogs and cats, which goes there, and they can find anything in the sewer. And they choose what they can try to make us and frighten us. So this is what's developed now, and there are many careers now with One Health. You get professor when you're working on this. So the third trick is creating emergencies, and this is what we speak about today. But the other two tricks are also very important, that this is possible. if you want to create emergencies, you have to impress people. You have to focus, that they are focused on something. You present them as a very dangerous thing. And we have experienced this. And there are false flag operations made. They put on stage what frightens, confuses, and angers us, what leaves us helpless, divides us, and weakens us, because we discuss who it was and why, and we are struggling when we see this, and it makes us obediently follow, so that we think it is right when people are killed, abused, violated, and controlled. They do those false flag operations that we say it's okay. And I may say here that what happened in Israel on the border to Palestine, when those young people were killed and nobody was protecting them, for me it is the same thing, or it's a similar thing as this false flag operation when the Twin Towers were just blown up. And they kill people without any scruple. These were 3,000 people for the weapon industry and for going for a new reorganizing the opium market in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Far East. And it was very, they invested some lives and they invested some money. And this is what they used to do. And even, we have no time to speak about World War I and World War II, but there were already similar things happening, where those people who want to earn money and have the power, where they let people die, millions of people die, millions of soldiers die, and it's still going on. We know what I'm speaking about. And China was, China played a good role, played a very important role in the last false flag operation, which was called COVID-19. And this is this. And you see China fighting the pandemic. Really fighting it. They are disinfecting the roads. As a specialist for hygiene, the first thing I learned, you cannot disinfect dirt. It's impossible. So when I saw in January, those pictures, I saw, what a theater. And there were people falling dead in the street and afterwards when most cameras were gone, they stood up again. And you see this, you see the CDC of the numbers of cases in China. This is this blue graphic there. You see it, and on the 1st of March, China has won the war against the virus. They just stopped making PCR tests, and it was gone, and they had parties again. They played their role to frighten us, and afterwards they were laughing about us. When we started in 18th of March, when we started this nonsense, they were already, there's no pandemic like this. It was so easily, so obvious to be seen how we were cheated, and China was laughing. They played this role, they invested some money, and they are in the board of the WHO where such things are planned. You see, Mr. Gheorghe on the right in down, he is the boss of China's CDC. And this is the members of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. They have the regie, they are the directors of what's going on the pandemic theater. They are the directors of this theater. And there is Mrs. Brundtland, she was the boss, she was a minister president in Norway. Afterwards, she was general secretary of the WHO. I know her from many events. And there is Mr. Farah, who comes from the Wellcome Trust and now is the epidemiological director in WHO. There's Anthony Fauci, everyone knows him. There's Dr. Chris Elias from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They are on this board. And they plan which disease can we blow up, that there is some industry that can earn money with it, or do it for politics, not only for pharmaceutical industry. If politics needs some frightened population, they can do it, they can arrange it. And then they have a map, when they're in their report from 2019, they had this map, this global map, where they listed all those possible candidates for pandemics. And it's not all, they invented more in the meantime. So, this is the emergencies I myself experienced as a professional in medicine and in politics. It started with HIV, where the people died from therapy and not from the infection, most of the people. There were intoxicated people. There is an immune deficiency, yes. People die from immune, but it's never was proved that the virus is the reason. They had many other reasons why they could die. And afterwards, people died who were healthy, died from because they had a positive test and were preventively, they got those drugs, and they were very dangerous. And I observed that, and there was BSE. There are too many. I cannot tell all those stories. But I will tell you one story about Ebola in West Africa. I experienced it because I was in 2011, I was there, and I was in Guinea, and I was in Conakry, and I have a friend there. He has a laboratory there, medical laboratory. It's paid by German government. And he is doing all the tests, and he called me in 2014, Wolfgang, you have to help me. I can stop this because I can make the test to find Ebola cases, and we can isolate them because Ebola is not spreading like a flu, but it's just you have direct contact with a person to be infected. So it's easy to isolate them. And he asked me, please help me, ask the German embassy and whether they can give money. And I asked, and the German embassy said, no, we cannot do anything. It's the WHO has taken over. And they didn't do anything. You see the cases. 28,000 people died. No, 11,000 people died. 28,000 cases in West Africa. And this was with the Ebola virus, which does not exist there where the breakout was. It was a virus which only exists in Congo, 3,000 kilometers distance from that, where the first cases were observed. 3,000 kilometers with a disease which is only transmitted by direct contact. And then when you do some research, you find that just on the other side of the border, 100 kilometers from that, there is a laboratory, and this laboratory is trying to find out hemorrhagic fever viruses. It's a US laboratory, and it's a bioweapon laboratory, whether you can use Ebola as a bioweapon. And it's in Sierra Leone, 100 kilometers from this first outbreak. And the child they chose out as an index case in Guinea, this child was 2 years old, and they said it has played with a fledermaus, with a bat, yes. And this is why it was ill. Afterwards, this child died from malaria. But they took this as a picture, and they made pictures, and they showed it as a case of Ebola. And then the Ebola was everywhere. This is the US lab in Kinema, Viral Hemorrhagic Fever Consortium from US. We're working with this very dangerous virus from 3,000 kilometer distance. And then this is the map of West Africa, and this is all where they made the clinical trials with Ebola. And Merck Sharp Dohme made the clinical trials in this time with those more than 20,000 cases, and they tried out the first so-called vaccination. It was a genetically modification of human beings, or the first one with DNA, with a vector virus, where they put some DNA into it that made the cells of the people who got this injection build antibodies against Ebola. So the same thing we experience now with COVID, what they did, the RNA thing. They did it with DNA, and this drug was marketed by Merck Sharp Dohme afterwards successfully, and so. This, there was in the report of Merck Sharp Dohme, they said that they were very thankful that the Wellcome Trust, that the UK Department of International Development, and so on, the US Department of Defense, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Health Canada, European Commission, they all give money for these trials. They financed it. It was a bioweapon experience, and there were 11,000 people killed to get a drug, the first injection, genetic injection against a virus marketed. There was no disease spreading from itself. They killed people to have this trial, and it was financed by those people there, by the European Commission too, to get this drug, the first drug on the market, because this is a new market. to make people produce their own antibodies. And this is what we experienced 1 billion times now with COVID. So this is what I found out. And you see it, this is the mortality, excess mortality in Germany. You see 3 years. This is the first year, 2020, the second and the third year. And you see the age groups, the young people. Nobody from the young people died in the year of pandemics. Nothing happened. There was no excess mortality at all in Germany. And at the end of the year, starting from the 1st of October in 2020, old people died. And people died in some institutions. People were in institutions. Because the 1st of October, they started making the PCR test obligatory for each person working in such an institution. And when they were positive, they had to stay at home. They had to be in quarantine. And there were no people for the old people who were cleaning them and feeding them, giving them to drink. And there were so many people dying in that time. There was an excess mortality, it was about 30%. They killed grandma there in that time. And they forbid the relatives to help, to enter. It was so brutal. It was such a brutal crime what they did. They killed old people. And you see, in spring, the next year, the screen is under mortality. It's because you can only die once. They had killed those people, which would die normally, one after one, slowly. And then you see the younger groups start with the vaccine. This is the grey field here, where the younger groups suddenly start dying, which had not died, nobody died in the year of pandemic. They started in this year when they started with the so-called vaccination, with the injections. And they were made GMOs, and it was 190 million injections in Germany. 190 million, so 2.5 injections per inhabitant. It was a very, very big experiment. And then our politicians said, it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. You know, the full vaccination was defined with a COVID vaccine approved in the EU. At least 14 days must have passed since the last vaccine dose was administered. Then you were vaccinated. And it was not one vaccination. When you got only one, you were never vaccinated. When you got 2, you had to wait 14 days. Then you were counted as vaccinated. And this is from the US statistics. You know whether people died after this COVID injection. And you see they die in the first 2 weeks. In the first week, most of them. So they all were non-vaccinated, although they died after directly in timely connection with this injection. And we had this. This is from Bergamo. We had this peak, this spike here. This was always in March, April 2020. Suddenly there was an excess mortality, very high. Oh, this is from, where is it? Alsace, I think it was, yes, the same. And this is from Madrid, the same. And you see this map of Europe from this time. And you see there is in northern Italy, there is in Madrid, and there is even in Stockholm some people over excess mortality for a short time. It was when the Swedish were ordered, when they were told that they had to forbid the relatives going to their people in the institutions. They isolated them too. And then this was a short time when in Sweden there was an excess mortality because old people were dying in that time in Sweden too, in the institutions. Afterwards, Sweden was always the best. And you know, when you make such a war against the people, and you have to fight in whole Europe and all over the world, you have to do the same thing. You cannot organize it as a politician. You cannot. You need someone who has international power, and you can really do it, not the WHO. But the NATO has. And the NATO was the one who did the whole logistics for the vials, for the injections. It was done by BARDA and DARPA in the US. They were preparing those injections. They were having all this, and then they just they transported it to us. And this is another thing in UK. There was midazolam. They killed people by putting them on the ventilator, but before they gave them this injection of a tranquilizer, and old people, they don't get away from this intubation anymore. They die when they are on intensive care, and to put some tube in their trachea. So, and they killed people with hydroxychloroquine in New York. The patients received 2.4 grams of hydroxychloroquine, where the red blood cells explode, and the black people are very, very sensitive. And it were 3 big studies made by the WHO, and they told the doctors to do this to prevent COVID, and even with the staff of the hospitals, and they killed thousands of people with hydroxychloroquine. It was Chris Whitty from the National Health Service who pronounced it. We know all this now, and when we spoke about, I published this in July in 2020 with hydroxychloroquine. Medical detectives were the headline. I published it, and WHO stopped the whole studies immediately. They were afraid that there would be more people investing into it. This was the NATO who did all this. They were proud of that they did it, and the NATO knows who got which vial, he knows all the numbers of the certain charge, the batches. They know the number of the batches, and because they registered everything and they had the logistics, and now we have this electronic data collecting, that digital data from the doctors, the electronic file the doctor has to make for every patient, and to digitalize every finding, every report, all he does. And now they can find out those who know who got which injection. They can find out who became ill and who not. It was a giant experiment with genetically modifying the population. And there was not the same contents in all the vials. There were different contents. We know this now from many studies. Some had DNA, some were dirty, some had nothing, if there would be something in all of them. When they continue, they now have the bird, cow, cat, mouse, milkman flu. They try to convince us that there will be another one coming. They have the new flu, and they want to. And U.S. government had given $500 million to find out some RNA vaccination, but Trump just canceled this contract because they were laughing at this. We were laughing at this. I think the best way to stop this nonsense is to laugh at them, to mock, because it is something you can mock easily. It's so obvious you can mock it. And now they have the newest thing is the NCD pandemic. It's the pandemic with non-communicable diseases, NCD. And one is the obesity, and the other thing is drinking too much alcohol. And you can find out new things, and they always have the same method. They say, this state doesn't do. There are so many fat people in this state. And they show us people, yes, we have to care for those fat people, and they make fat people a topic in the media. And they say, there are too many fat people. The state has to do something. Those poor people, they cannot live a long time because they explode. And so there are drugs now. We can do something against. You have to buy them. Each state has to mobilize money, tax money, that the people can be provided those drugs. They are very expensive. One injection, €1,000. Very expensive. And now they have many side effects. The shares of Novo Nordisk, who is producing them, went up, exploded when WHO made this NCD pandemic. But now they found out there are so many side effects, it's dangerous, and the shares go down again. But they know this before. They have sold them already. They make wave riding. They make the waves, and they ride on the waves, and in time before, because they know already how long they can keep this story. They test it, and they make one wave after the other. Yes. Thank you. And now they will frighten us with cancer. I have no time to tell you about this, but I want to tell you one thing which is very important. This is that you can use this technology with nanoparticle to transport them into bodies of people in many ways. And the most important way you can do it is with food. You can intoxicate people with nanoparticle and have inside this RNA technology. You can microcapsule those nanoparticles so that they are set free only in the intestine, and there it goes into the lymphatic system of the intestine, and then you have very, very bad immune disturbances, and you get cancers and autoimmune diseases, and all those diseases. You can make it easily. It's no problem to do this. And it's very difficult to find out where the sources are, because you could put it in this food, in that food, and you can make a plan to hide the real reason why people die and get ill. I want to warn you. I don't want to frighten you, but I want to make you that you watch what's going on and you ask questions. So the best part of my story I cannot tell you because my time now was cut brutally.
Punishing us by leaving the best part.
I just want to tell you one thing, perhaps one thing, because what we do in our society has to do with communication, and where society is only there where there is communication. Where there's no communication, communications means with feedback. This is communication, not information. Whereas communication, there is society and there is self-organization. There is democracy possible. But if it's too big, we are dependent on media, and it doesn't work as we see. So I think we should see these pictures. You see, you can play the many small games. You can play them. But you can't play the game down, which is too big, which is the European Union, which is WHO, which is all those. And this is why I made this formula. This is the Wodarg formula. It's very important. You should have a tattoo on your arm with it. Yes. It is that resilience, a society is resilient and can live long time successfully when there is transparency, when everyone understands what's going on. And when you can say, no, this is not what I want, when you can interfere. So you have to know what's going on. So transparency is the most important factor for a society to be stable, to see mistakes. And what is under the line, which makes it impossible to have transparency, is the size of the system. The bigger the system, the less you can have transparency, the less you can interfere when something goes wrong. And it's multiplied with C, which is complexity of the problem. If you need some specialists to understand what's going on, you cannot interfere anymore. You can be betrayed, you can be, you're just a victim of what they do. So if we want to have a new society, we have to organize in a way that transparency is guaranteed. And you know, this is subsidiarity principle. And you are in an institution who says subsidiarity is the most important thing. And the European Union should only interfere when the small communities and the countries cannot do it themselves. But what the problem is, and nobody speaks about it, is who defines what the small communities cannot do themselves. It's not the communities themselves who say we cannot. It's the European Union who defines it. And you may, if you are in a country, you can say, no, this is not right. You can have some process that you protest. But what is decided is done by the Commission. And this is the big problem. There's no subsidiarity. It's the opposite. It's just a greenwashing of a totalitarian system, what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wodarg, and no apologies, Christine. It's my pleasure and my honor to co-host this meeting with you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, when future historians will look back at the early 2020s, they will not only remember the pandemic, the economic shocks or the war at Europe's borders, they will also record a silent but profound transformation, how the European Union used the crisis to expand centralization, surveillance and control. So please allow me to wrap up our meeting with broadening the issue of today, not as the launch of a conspiracy theory, but as a sketch of what inevitably should be concluded. COVID was a test case for the attempt to wipe out our freedom on this continent, and it was a rehearsal, a brief introduction to what followed and to what is coming up. COVID was presented as an emergency. We've seen this. We were told restrictions were temporary and necessary to save lives, but in reality, it was a laboratory experiment. How far could governments go in directing the lives of citizens? Once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. Today, we see this logic extended. 1. The CBDC, the digital euro, the central bank's digital currency, is presented as an innovation, but programmable money is controllable money. It could decide what you can buy, when you can spend, and even enforce carbon quotas. 2. The digital identity or the digital wallet, said to be neutral, can easily turn into a system that conditions access to services, healthcare, education, even jobs, on compliance. COVID already showed us the QR code society as it can work and as it will work if we go on with this EU digital identity. 3. Chat control proposes scanning private messages in the name of protecting children, but once surveillance of all communication is accepted, confidential exchanges between doctors, lawyers or journalists are no longer safe. 4. The Digital Services Act institutionalizes censorship under the pretext of fighting disinformation. Unelected fact-checkers decide what may be said. Here we really come close to what Robert Kennedy Jr. described as follows: there is no time in history where the people who were censoring speech were the good guys. 5, and now the so-called democracy shield, a plan for Brussels to define which opinions are legitimate. During her State of the Union speech last month in the European Parliament, Ursula von der Leyen theatrically waved her right arm to the right side of the hemicycle, threatening explicitly the Conservative MEPs to use the democracy shield against them and their opinions. Democracy does not need a shield, it needs oxygen, open debate and dissent. What unites these projects, all these projects, is not progress, but control. Step by step, Europe is moving towards a system resembling shyness. And I quote Christine Lagarde herself on this point, who, without being aware of the image, uses China as a model, an example to follow, and I quote, "A digital currency where it has been piloted on a fairly large scale in China is of use and of service to all the citizens. So it is not something that is good for the elite, or it's good for the young, or it's good for some versus others. If it is well done and if it is well implemented, it would be of service to all citizens." My friends, the European Union is evolving towards A state that tracks your money, B, a system that verifies your identity and every step, C, a regime that scans your messages, and D, and authorities that decide which voices may be heard. This is not the Europe of openness and liberty. It is a union driven by fear, where restrictions replace freedom and good intentions pave the road to servitude. Colleagues, we must resist, not because we reject technology, but because we defend freedom. Not because we fear innovation, but because power, once centralized, is never given back. Not because we want chaos, but because free speech is the foundation of order. Europe faces a choice. Will it follow the path of liberty, with all its risks and debates, or will it follow the path of control towards a digital prison, a giant digital gulag? Let us make sure that the story of the 2020s is not one of surrender, but of courage. Let us remember Churchill's words, never give in, never give in, never, 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 in nothing great or small, large or petty, never give in, never yield to force, never yield to apparently overwhelming might of the enemy, never give in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerolf. Now, there was supposed to be a Q&A, was supposed to be some questions, but unfortunately we don't have time for that anymore. But I would like to give Gheorghe Piperea the floor briefly. He just asked to make some remarks, so keep it brief, please.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. I listened very carefully what Mr. Wodarg said, and I even wrote a lot of what he said. There's so many things to say about what happened to us during pandemics. So little time to do it. But let me tell you some very brief remarks. First of all, what we've learned from the pandemic period. Crises are used or invented to be used for control and to freeze human rights. It is for the greater good. Do you remember? They said, es ist for ihre Sicherheit. I remember this was a kind of syntagma used during that period of time 8 years ago. Two, paid or sponsored science is pseudoscience. Actually, it's not science, as you already demonstrated. People learn not to trust anymore this science. Unfortunately, people do not trust medicine anymore. This is the reality. Yep. 3. Authorities should not be trusted in any circumstances. Authorities lie, steal, misconduct. Authorities censure. Yeah, as Mr. Annemans said, hide unwanted truth. Promote the so-called noble lie. You remember the idea of noble lie? If things goes complicated, we have to lie to them. This is Mr. ex-president of the European Commission, Juncker. Unfortunately, people do not trust democracy anymore. We have to learn people that democracy is the only way, because otherwise there is only one thing, and this thing is called totalitarianism. I would be glad to say something else, but there is no time anymore. I think that this was a very good start for a discussion about what really happened to us from the point of view of democracy during this pandemic period. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. That pretty much concludes the official conference style. So I think what we all should take away is it is up to us now to really stop this totalitarian power grab and the erection of a totalitarian regime, and we need to stop that. And in order to be able to do that, we need to get strengthened up. We need to build up our strength, and for that purpose, we have provided some beverages and some food to get up the stamina to fight these globalitarian misanthropists. So please feel free. I invite you all to stay, and we can have discussions on one-on-one basis. And Dr. Wodarg and Freija, they're going to be here and answer any question you still may have. So please enjoy. Thank you.